Hi, this is Coach Colette, and I am welcoming you to another episode of Coach Chat. Have you ever struggled with dieting or your relationship with food? Or have you ever had experiences where you feel like you are struggling with an issue and can't quite figure out why? These may not seem like they are related, but in fact, they really are, because they are likely connected to limiting beliefs or coping mechanisms based on your life experiences. And I know that sounds like, wow, what is she talking about? Well, it's going to get really clear in this episode of Coach Chat, because I am speaking with Marcella Friel. She is a mindful eating mentor who helps health-conscious women to love and forgive themselves. She's also the author of a new book called Tap, Taste, Heal. Use Emotional Freedom Technique, or EFT, to eat joyfully and love your body. So you probably may recall that I am also trained in EFT-Tapping. So I'm really excited to bring a deeper discussion on EFT with you in this Coach Chat episode, because Marcella is also trained in EFT, and it's the foundation of the book that I mentioned earlier. So if you ever have had questions about your relationship with food or other substances, or even just how you operate in the world, you are really going to enjoy this Coach Chat session. So get ready and listen up. So hello, this is Coach Colette, and welcome back to another episode of Coach Chat. I am really excited today to be speaking with my friend, Marcella Friel. She is a food and forgiveness mentor for health-conscious women, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about what that actually means. And she's author of a new book, very exciting, authors, Tap, Taste, Heal. Use Emotional Freedom Techniques, or EFT, to eat joyfully and love your body. Are you here, Marcella?
I'm here, Colette. Hey.
How are you?
I'm good. Happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
It's my pleasure, actually. And I know that you and I connected through our coaches. So I always think it's amazing to talk about the fact that as coaches and mentors that we actually do walk our talk and get support for our own health and well-being. So I'm excited to reconnect with you.
Yeah, thank you. I know. It's great to see you again.
So what is this all about? What is a food and forgiveness mentor? Please let me and my listeners know what that is.
Well, I work primarily with health-conscious women who chronically struggle with yo-yo dieting, binge eating, sugar addiction, and chronic body shaming. And, in our culture, if you look around, the quote unquote obvious answer is, well, go on a diet or get yourself to the gym or just, do some dieting, do some exercise. So by the time women come to me, oh my goodness, they've done a million diets and, they've lost the weight, they've gained it back. They've been really good with their food, then they go off the wagon. And most of them know that their struggles with food really have roots in some unresolved emotional issues that they know are there, but they can't get to them. And where the forgiveness piece came in was a client I was working with one time said to me, Some women use razor blades. I use food.
Wow.
I know, exactly. And when I heard that, I was like, whoa. And that's when I realized that there's a whole conversation about forgiveness that needs to happen, you know, certainly on an individual level, but as a culture that, you know, just hasn't happened yet. So the main tool that I use in my work is emotional freedom techniques, EFT, just like it said in the title of my book. And I can tell you a little bit more about that. And I know, of course, you know about that. So we can talk some EFT shop talk. But, you know, the message that I drive home to my clients more than anything else is your struggles with food are not your fault.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's so easy and so seductive to blame yourself for your failure at dieting. But as I actually talk about in my book, Tap, Taste, Heal, the latest research is that dieting, i.e. chronic caloric restriction, is in fact the best known predictor of weight gain.
That's fascinating. So
Did you
you're
get that?
saying, yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that the actual action of restricting the calories that I'm intaking has a direct correlation to whether or not I will gain weight.
Absolutely. I mean, I can elaborate on that if you want to hear a little bit more about it.
Well, I think it's interesting because we would most likely think it would be the opposite, right? We would think that, okay, I take in less, so therefore I am gaining less.
Well, initially that is what happens in the beginning phases of a diet. You know, they're like, let's say you have a pattern of overeating and then you go on a diet and you start cutting back and you're taking in, you know, 1,000 calories a day or what have you. The body says, oh, okay, great. You know, we can do this. And it starts to, you know, it starts to lose the weight. And then it's like, oh, okay, my diet is working. But now what we've discovered is that there is what you could call a metabolic set point. So the body has metabolically a certain set point that it has determined, the brain, you know, has determined is the weight that you should be. It's like a thermometer, right? It's like the thermostat on your wall. So, you know, it might be 100 pounds, it might be 300 pounds, excuse me. But when your weight starts to drop below that set point, that is when the body fights like hell to keep those pounds on. And that's the point where like the diet doesn't work and then you feel frustrated and, oh, maybe it's my fault. The other thing that happens during dieting is that the brain will trick the body into, the palate in particular, into accepting and wanting a wider range of flavors. And I talk about this all in my book. It's all in there. And so, you know, things that you would never be attracted to, foods you would never be attracted to, suddenly it's like, oh my God, you know, I want that food. Because you're basically what's happening with dieting is that your body is going into like a starvation mode. So your brain and your metabolism are like, all right, wait a second, we're going to hold on to every ounce of fat because, you know, we're starving and we might need this as energy. Or like, hey, it's like an emergency, you know, we need to get food in right away. So this is one of the reasons why diets don't work. There's so many other reasons. So in my book, Tap, Taste, Heal, I also talk about the corollary of the metabolic set point, which I call an identity set point.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's say you're somebody who's been carrying around 100 pounds of extra weight. And you've been doing that 20, 30, 40 years, however long. To lose that weight and to radically change your body, you have to re-engineer your identity, who you are in relationship to your tribe, in relationship to your world, So, so many women will have the experience of like, they lose weight, they go to their office, and people say like, wow, you look great. Oh my gosh, you've lost all this weight. And that can be precisely the point where, there's like a shutdown and the weight comes back on. So what I do with my work with women is help them prepare that internal landscape so that they become comfortable with becoming visible,
right,
as a transformed person.
Right. Understood. Right. And I think that that's crucial, from the work that we're both doing, EFT work, and the work that I often focus is around either stress reduction or anxiety, and also around limiting beliefs. And those limiting beliefs can be in any arena. I know that you're focusing around, or the manifestation that you're focusing around happens to be with your clients mostly around food. But like
Right.
like we were talking about earlier before we got onto the podcast, right? What we all use different coping mechanisms to deal with those limiting beliefs, right? So for some it's food, for others it might be cigarettes, for others it might be alcohol, right? So there are lots of ways we try to fill in that hole or to fill in that gap. And if we're not looking at what those issues are, simply taking out, stopping the smoking, or like you're saying, going on the diet, in many cases, the transformation doesn't necessarily last because the issues themselves at the core, like you're saying, the core identity has not yet been fully, I guess, supported or birthed. I don't know how you would say that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, the diet and the weight are sort of the cherry on the sundae, so to speak. So, you take the cherry off, you put another cherry on, but the sundae's still there.
Right.
And, this is a very curious thing, Colette, that we're sitting here having this conversation about body weight and dieting and food, because frankly, I'll just tell you the truth. I have been a size 4 petite my entire life. Pretty much. Like I've never, and I talk about this in the book, I've never dieted. But what I do have that tapping has helped me with tremendously, and I know you want to get into talking about tapping. I grew up in a very, very intense environment. My father was an absent father, and he went to prison when I was 18 months old, and he died in prison when I was 9. And my mother was a single mom raising 5 kids. And, we were like the poor people on the block. And so I grew up with all of the compounded traumas that come from, those circumstances. And, for me, I had, I'll call it a success set point. Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
Like I could only be so successful because I came, and my grandparents were immigrants, and we experienced all the discrimination of, Italian, Sicilian immigrants. Italians are more assimilated now, but in my parents' and grandparents' generation, it was a lot more intense. And so, for me, I felt like there was this whole ancestral, generational, it was like a lid. I can only go so far. And, this is it's so deeply ingrained, So it wasn't until I was able to start tapping and really, repattern my brain that I recognized, number one, it's okay to be successful. And number 2, my success can actually benefit them, whether they're dead or alive or what have you. And 3, this is the experience that I draw from my own history of healing trauma that forms the basis of connection. I happen to work with women who carry a lot of body weight, but that's kind of like the superficial distinction, so to speak, because underneath, I heard somebody say recently, trauma doesn't belong to any one of us. Trauma, like we're all traumatized, we're all carrying trauma. So it's kind of like plugging into that underground water, so to speak.
Right, right. Yeah, I think it's very interesting that you share your story of healing ancestral trauma. I know we've talked about, in communities of color, there are lots of conversations around healing ancestral trauma. And when I do tapping sessions here in New York, I've done them in some spaces. And what I realize when I'm doing tapping, and sometimes what happens for me, particularly in group settings and also in individual tapping sessions, like I will just hear what the message is that we're supposed to tap on. I mean, more often than not, I'm using your own words, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then there are times where just the message comes in. And I remember doing a session a year ago where we were tapping around success, and the words that came up to me were, you'll have to work twice as hard to get there. And I remember when I was saying that, and people were just tapping, and more often than not, they were just repeating what I was saying. But that one, everybody was like, oh my God, yeah, so it's very interesting, the ability for this modality of EFT tapping to, like you're saying, get deeper into this root of the trauma, the anxiety, whatever the issue is, to allow then that healing to take place.
Yeah, no kidding. Boy, that's amazing. I have to work twice as hard.
Mm-hmm.
I have to work twice as hard for half the result.
Exactly.
Oof. Oh, I feel that one. Okay, I think I need to do some tapping on that one. I'm going to tap on that. Oh, God. Oh, my God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think that that's what's interesting about tapping, right? So that when and I'd love to hear your thoughts, right? Like I was saying, so when you connect with clients, it's that aspect of using their language and being able to help them to go deeper into the issue. And then do you ever have that experience as well, where you kind of get messages that come to you even if they haven't said it?
All the time. Yeah. All the time. I mean, it's interesting about tapping. We should probably tell a little bit about what tapping is in case people are listening. Oh, should I just go ahead? So, please fill in, because I know you know. So, the easiest way to describe tapping is as a form of emotional acupuncture. I've heard people describe it that way. So what we do with tapping is we fingertip tap on points that are at or near the ends of certain acupuncture meridians. And the tapping acts like a circuit breaker on the electromagnetic signal of the distress. So like what you just said about, I have to work twice as hard to get half the result. I just got like a rush of cortisol in my body just listening to that. Just hearing that and reflecting on that makes me immediately go into like a fight or flight mode. So to use tapping to disperse that, I can repeat that phrase to myself. I have to work twice as hard for half the results while tapping on these certain points. And then what will happen is the limbic system of the brain, where the stress and the emotional self-regulation occur, the limbic system will kind of it'll burp or hiccup, and it'll just release it. It'll just release it. And then that's the point at which you can say, well, what do I choose to believe? What belief can I choose to supplant this old story that I have to work twice as hard for half the result?
Right.
I don't know. What would you say about it?
Right. I love that. Yeah. And your description, exactly 100% spot on. I think what the interesting part about tapping, and again, I don't know what your experience working with clients, what's interesting to me sometimes is particularly when people come with physical issues, and not necessarily body weight like you're talking about, but actually oh, my neck hurts, or my shoulder hurts, or my lower back hurts. And I've been in situations where we start there and then we end up uncovering that back pain isn't just back pain, right? Because there's a connection between what's going on in the body and what's going on in the mind. So sometimes, I think I've said it others, is, like sometimes my shoulder hurts because I'm carrying too much in my bag. And sometimes my shoulder hurts because I'm crunched up, and I'm stressed, or I haven't done any of those things and my shoulder still hurts. And then it's a matter of, okay, what else is going on in my mind? Like you were saying, the set point, where am I with something else in my life?
Or you just like, I'm carrying too much.
Right. Almost metaphorically, or like,
That's
right,
right. Exactly.
I'm carrying too much, and my body is giving me this signal that I'm carrying too much, even if I haven't picked up a bag and I've been in my house all day.
Yeah.
Is my body giving me the signal that I'm, quote, carrying too much?
Yeah. And then where did that start? And so like in my tapping work, I will work with that. Like, okay, my shoulder hurts. Okay, I'm carrying too much. Okay, well, what is it that's too much that you're carrying? And then when did you start carrying that? And that's when you really go down the rabbit hole. I mean, you can go into childhood. I've done in utero trauma, past lives. I mean, there's a saying in the tapping world, try it on everything. And there's some people actually who do really amazing work on like birth trauma and in utero stuff. So, I mean, I could tell you a story about this. I worked with a woman one time who was trying to get pregnant. And, she couldn't get pregnant. And we were tapping on all of that. And then what came out was that when her mother was pregnant with her, her father, who was an alcoholic, stabbed her mother in the stomach. Yeah, isn't that horrible?
Wow.
Did not break the placenta, like it was a surface wound. But, and of course, in utero stuff, like we learn this, somebody tells you the story, right? But that's what we work with. That's the working basis. So we went back to that baby in her mother's belly, and I had my adult client go back into her belly with that baby. And she ended up wrapping her whole body around that fetus and calling in her mother's friends to put like a web of hands around the belly. And, it was one of those like, huge, big shifts. 6 weeks later.
Right. Right. And I think that that's a great story to share, to the point earlier when you said, it can dissipate, right? There are times where, yes, in 1 or 2 sessions, issues can dissipate, and yet that there are these kinds of issues where it might take multiple sessions, right, with someone to actually begin to unpack and really explore. And I also think that there's also that sense of willingness, right? Like willingness to explore what's going on and being able to move through any emotions that come up as one does tap more and starts to uncover more things.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are, if we talk about trauma, there's sort of isolated trauma, right? Like, you might be somebody who loves dogs and then suddenly you're bit by a dog and it's like, okay, tapping can kind of knock that out really quickly. But then there's procedural trauma, so like, let's say the dog is dad coming home every night angry. And that's what you grew up with for the first 20 years of your life. Then that's one of those situations that takes, multiple applications of tapping. Mm-hmm. But the good news is, really with all of this, no matter how horrific it sounds, it's remarkably amazing. And, the healing is possible, like real healing, real transformation, real crossover, real. Si se puede, you can do it.
Yes. Yes.
So.
And so it's interesting to me, I'm curious about forgiveness? Because often the tapping, we talk about it from the sense of releasing the trauma, releasing the attachments, releasing the anxiety. Where do you see, because I know the other half of what you're sharing is food and forgiveness. How does forgiveness play into all of this?
Yeah, I really like Caroline Myss's definition of forgiveness.
Okay.
Or actually, to tell you the truth, I'm not sure she overtly defines it this way, but this is what I pick up. That forgiveness fundamentally is not about saying that what the other person did is okay. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions about forgiveness, right? And that's part of the reason why forgiveness is so hard, because that is essentially like a loss of power. Or it's a bypassing of, the pain. The way I like to define forgiveness is calling your spirit home, calling your soul back to your body from the people, the places, the situations, the beliefs that it has wandered into, and where the mistaken beliefs are formed. So in my book, Tap, Taste, Heal, there's a whole piece in there. One of my favorite chapters is called The Many Flavors of Gorgeous. And it's about celebrating body diversity and body size diversity. And of course, in that chapter, I talk about shame and perfectionism. But, shame, none of us emerge ex utero feeling ashamed. Shame is something we inherit, like depending on the conditions of our lives. So, economic shame or racial shame or body size shame or what have you. And it becomes kind of like this sticky, toxic goo that we get stuck with. So what happens when you can use tapping to actually recognize, wow, this shame is not mine. It's one thing to know, up here from the neck up, oh, there's nothing to be ashamed of, but it's another thing when your nervous system gets it.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. And that's the moment when the opportunity is created that whatever pieces of your soul have migrated away from you to these beliefs that, oh, I should be ashamed of this or I should be ashamed of that, it's not mine. It never was mine. And then all those, and of course, this is what we eat over, right? We go to our addictions to soothe ourselves from the pain of that shame. So we heal that at the root, and then here comes our soul coming back to us. And we get, like Caroline Myss talks about it, as like, we get more currents of energy in the body. We're more in present time. We have more available to us. And then that's the place from which a woman can make a conscious choice about her food. I love myself enough to say no to this. I love myself enough to say yes to this. I'm going to eat a cookie at my granddaughter's birthday party. Big deal. Just one cookie. Whatever. But she gets to make a choice from her authentic place.
I love that.
All right.
I know.
That. I'm getting excited.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think, and conscious choice and acting with intention are definitely aspects of the work that I seek to do with women as well, making conscious choices from a place of intention and from a place of understanding what are your priorities, right? Like an understanding. And I love that. And then in the context of what you just shared, also understanding what's not yours, right? Like that sense of this is mine and that's not mine. And I don't need to act out of something that's not mine.
I don't have to define myself by the way, such and such has defined me. The dominant culture, my family of origin, my last lover, you name it. Yeah, so like you're talking about intention, Colette. It's like, what does it take to activate that intention? Right? It takes, you have to be in present time.
Right. You have to be in present time, and you also need to be aware of what's really important to you and what your desires and your needs are, and then having the courage to act from that place.
Courage is huge.
Courage is huge, and not, I love what you said, right? Not defining myself based on what someone else has told me that's what I am, right? No, I am who I say that I am. Yeah. Fantastic. So I ask all of my guests one question, which is, what does start within mean to you?
I love that. To me, there's no other way. So I think I wrote this to you, that there's a quote I love by Anais Nin, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are.
Right.
So if we go back to shame, for example, so let's say I'm carrying a really heavy burden of shame, and I know that I'm eating my shame every night at 10 o'clock when I sit in front of the TV and I plow through a bag of chips or what have you. That is actually my starting basis. That is, how do I want to say it? That's kind of like the fuel of my transformational journey. Okay, so this is what I'm doing. So first of all, taking the judgment out of it, right? Secondly, there's some wisdom to it. And chances are it's some need for protection, it's a need for comfort, it's a need for safety. So often we confuse what we want with what we need, like I want the chips, but I need comfort. So start within, to me, is about being able to turn, going beyond the symptom relief of the question of like, should you be eating the chips or should you be eating celery sticks? Like that's like, let's just bypass that and go down to, okay, what does this need? Where did it not get met? How can you as an adult meet it now in present time? How can we use tapping to clear this residual trauma? So starting within, whatever is within. And then, then it's like we're like Luke Skywalker using the Force, Then it's like we have this power. And then we can, once that's sort of cleared and we align it with our intention, just like what you're saying, then we have this power to create the experience we actually want.
I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. Yes, nothing more to be said on that. I love that. So we've been talking about your book, Tap, Taste, Heal, Use Emotional Freedom Techniques to Eat Joyfully and Love Your Body. How else can our listeners find out more about your work and what you're doing, what you're up to?
Well, you can find me on my website, Marcella Friel, MarcellaFriel, marcellafriel.com. That's probably a great place to start. You can find me on Instagram. You can look up Tapping with Marcella on Facebook. If women who are listening are interested in exploring my work, in addition to the book, my book is coming out, but I also have a 6-month profoundly transformational mentorship program called the Women, Food, and Forgiveness Academy. And we go deep, 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 deep into all these issues. So if women are interested in learning more about the Academy, they can go to my website and sign up for my next free Taste of Forgiveness discovery call. And we basically get on a group call on Zoom. It's an opportunity for you to hear from yourself about what you need for the next steps of your journey and to see if the Academy is a fit for you.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that information, and we'll make sure that our listeners can get that information also on our social network in case they want to connect with you. And so this is my time to share with you the opportunity to connect with me, Coach Colette. And please keep listening. I'm having a lot of fun doing these coach chat conversations. So stay tuned for our next episode. And until then, start within to finish strong.